will your product have true product market fit in that enterprise world? If the answer is no, we need to reposition the product and go after a different market. There's a lot of big competitors in this space. And it's so funny because obviously we come from like that side of Twitter. I've always done random businesses. Some did good, some didn't. I've always had these random things. I would say success to me is like you're doing like 10 to 50 mil in revenue a year.
Hey Nick, it's really nice to meet you. It's been a long time, and um, I'll just let you introduce yourself. Let's just jump into it like that.
Yeah. So my name is Nick. I run LeadBird, which is a B2B lead generation agency. We work with clients like Palo Alto, Ring Central, and other like Fortune 500s. But we also work with a lot of young startups, solo person agencies. And during my time of running LeadBird, I've also built, a whole bunch of SaaS companies that kind of fit into that cold email space. And that's pretty much why I'm here to talk about SaaS with Rohan.
Awesome. Yeah. So the SaaS companies that you have built, can you walk us through the journey? Like, how did you come up with the not the idea for the SaaS, but the fact that you wanted to build one? What was the motivation behind it, the story?
Yeah, so running the lead gen agency, there was like so many things that I just saw opportunities in, right? And just so many things that like I personally was having issues with while using other tech stacks, and so that's kind of what made me think, okay, like how can I go about building my own? And in some situations it worked out really well. In some situations it didn't work out really well. And those are some of the things that, I'd love to kind of go through on
So
here.
yeah. Let's start with the first one. What was the first SaaS project you started with?
It was either Inboxy or Quick Lines. I mean, honestly, like all of our SaaSes, like they all share similar things, right? Either it's the back end or it's the front end, right? And so we kind of all started them at around the same time. And then, kind of finished and released and marketed one, moved on to the next, and then just kind of went back and forth with all of that. But I think the official first one was either Inboxy or Quick Lines.
Hmm.
Probably Quick Lines where we were like fully done.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Got you. So right now you have three SaaS companies. You have Emmy, Scrubby, and Quicklines, right?
Yeah, and then one more. I'm actually missing it on top of my head, but we got Inboxy, Scrubby, Quick Lines, and Emmy. That's four. And then we have one more on the way.
Did I just count? Did I count four and have three on my hands?
I think so, because you said that, and I was like, wait, that's three? I was like, no, wait, that has to be four.
Yeah. So which one of those was the biggest bitch, biggest headache?
Yeah. Yeah. Biggest one by far has been Emmy,
Hmm.
right? Because if you look at like Quick Lines, Inboxy, Scrubby, and then Emmy, like Emmy is the only one because Emmy kind of combines the other three, right? It integrates with the other three,
What's
and it
Emmy?
just has
What's Emmy?
yeah.
Yeah.
Emmy's it's a cold email sending platform, so it's very similar to tools like Instantly, Smart Lead,
Hmm.
Quick Mail, where it does the inbox rotation, and so it's just more of a monster in the sense, right? There's just so much more that it can do, and that kind of results to it being way more complex compared to like something like QuickLines. QuickLines is a very simple product,
Yeah.
right? Like the back end is very easy.
Hmm.
Truthfully, if we knew everything we knew right now, I think we could easily rebuild it in under 30 days, like from start to finish.
Yeah.
But Atomy is definitely one of the ones where it was like just way, way, way out of the league.
Hmm.
It's something we're still working on getting like
And
fully completed.
with Emmy, you guys pioneered a lot of the features that we now take for granted, which no one really knows, right? So I think I saw you talking about domain rotation and inbox rotation like 2 years ago or something. And
Yeah.
yeah. So tell us about that.
Yeah, so it's funny, right? Like, obviously I never released it. And Smart Lead and Instantly, Nils and Babiv, they've done great, right?
Yes.
But those are the features that we had like almost 2 years ago and we were using internally with our email sending platform Emmy. And we still have right now, I still think, the greatest feature set. But the thing is like that's where we messed up. We just built so many features so early on without fully testing it, and then just kept stacking on, half-built features. And now it's like, okay, when we try to go identify a bug, it's like kind of playing like Jenga, right? It's like you find
Yeah.
one bug, you fix it, you move in the right spot, but by moving that initial block to fix that bug, you're making the tower collapse. And it's kind of like a continuous cycle of that. And that's kind of why Emmy is where it is. Like, does it work for us internally for our pull mode campaigns? Absolutely, right? But that's because we know the developers, and when there's something going wrong, we can identify it, tell the developers to go fix it, right? But from a user standpoint, like point of view, at this current moment, there's just no opportunity there for a user to come in and be able to like use it at a full capacity. We do have a handful of users, but like we kind of give them that like one-on-one customer support, and like something goes down, we know like when and how to fix it, but we just can't scale that. And so that's kind of where the issue went.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, right? So a lot of founders try to build products for their services, for the services companies in-house. And then when they try to transition it to a alpha or a beta for the public, it's not that easy to do it. So you can have a script that is working for you, but when you transition it for the public, it stops working. So what were some of the things that you experienced? You might have tried to open it up to the public, right? The ME beta alpha. So what was the point where you were like, nah, this needs a lot of finishing around the edges?
Yeah, I mean, just even for me personally, because like, what I would hate to do is put my name on something and have a whole bunch of users use it, pay for it, and then it not work out, right? And the other thing too is like I I noticed from like releasing quick lines early in the year, if there's any kind of development issue, the first person they reach out to is me in my Twitter DMs, my
Yes,
email,
yes.
and it's like at this current moment, I don't want to be the guy that does chat support 24/7. And so I was like, all right, with something like Emmy, like I personally know that it is, kind of hard to use, a little bit buggy on certain things. I knew like quick lines is a simple product. It's
Yes.
literally like it's impossible to mess it up, right? But we still have users that hit us up on a daily, like, hey, like, having issues and stuff. And so that just kind of flipped a switch in my mind, like, all right, if this many users are hitting us up about quick lines, imagine how many would hit us up about Emmy. And so that was like kind of like the flip of my switch of like, hey, like, I don't want to release this thing until it's 100% good. We're not having any of these bugs, like all of that stuff. Because like honestly, like in terms of bugs, like we have the same like bugs that Instantly and Smart Lead have as well. Every email platform you'll notice has like very similar bugs. Most of it has to do with like inbound fetching of like email replies.
Yes,
Most
that's
email tools,
incredibly difficult. Yes.
yeah, and most email tools will miss anywhere from like 3 to 10% of all replies. And so like, when you're using inbox rotation, there's just so many like replies that could be missing, and so many situations where it could be missing.
Absolutely. And there are lots of nuances, right? So you have tens of different not browsers, email providers. So you have Zoho, you have Google, you have Microsoft, and all of them have different email has not been delivered messages. Everything is different. It is difficult to fetch emails from threads. It's difficult to sync up 100 mailboxes for a single user in like 5 minutes. All those things are incredibly complex, and that is difficult to do. Yes, makes sense. On Emmy, let's pick up a project, anyone. So since we are talking about Emmy, can you walk us through the development journey of Emmy? So how many developers was it roughly? How long did it take to get to a stage where you were able to internally use it? And what were some of the things you thought that, hey, this will be built in a month and it took 4 months? What were those stories?
Yeah, so we have tons of nightmares, tons of great things to share. Overall, like I've been super happy with the development team. Just like, their relentless effort to kind of make everything work out has been, very motivating for everyone else on the team. Off the top of my head, so let me think. So like, I mean, the cool thing is like since we have 4 companies or 4 SaaS products, they all like if you kind of looked at them individually, they all kind of work together. So the developers that we use, like we share across all of them, right? And so like the dev that built the front end for Emmy is also the one who built the front end for Quick Lines.
Yes.
A lot of the back end things for the actual email sending and email fetching is the same dude who worked on the back end of Inboxy, right? So all these products kind of work together. So at our peak, we had roughly about 16 developers, which was, in my opinion, kind of like an overkill, specifically because we didn't have, and this is one of the things I love talking to you about, kind of just like picking your head about, is like the dev ops, right?
Yes.
So like me, I'm not a developer by any means, right?
Yes.
But I am pretty operationally focused, and like we just didn't have any kind of like routines or operations built in with any of our like SaaS products and our developers. We're kind of just like, hey, like this is the features that we want to work on.
Yeah.
Let's start working on
Go
them,
work
right?
on them. Yeah.
And that there was no like testing or anything. So yeah, like with any like we had tons of things where I mean pretty much everything that we ever like put on the roadmap got delayed. But it was definitely usable within 3 or 4 months of us working on it. Um, but yeah, that's
Yeah,
pretty much hopefully I answered
that
your
makes
question.
sense. And you mentioned that at your peak you had roughly 16 developers, and then you now like toned it down slightly by the 20%, and then that helped you ship faster. And the DevOps, right? So in technical terms, like DevOps is a separate thing for developers, but in operations,
Mm.
assigning work to developers, the project management and the tech lead part of the role, how did you solve that in a company of, let's say, 12? Because at 12, here are the challenges you have. When you're a team of four, a non-technical person can roughly tell them that, hey, do this, and you know what is happening. But when you start to expand that team from, let's say, 4 to 6 to 12, now you can't check in with everyone every day. It's like this triangle, and everyone is hidden because everyone who does not work is hidden in these caves and coves in your project under ClickUp tasks and ClickUp tasks. So how did you refine your project management? Like, did you hire a senior developer, CTO? How did that process work out?
Yeah, so we have a CTO, and one thing he encouraged us to push forward with was kind of like adopting like a sprint methodology. And so that was like something that we did heavily, and it really did improve how we just communicated with each other, how we help like hold each other accountable, so things of that sort. And so, like I said, right when we first started, it was kind of just like speaking to them here and there, putting calls on the calendar here and there, and very unproductive, very like just a waste of time and money. And so what we started to do was we would do daily sprints for about 15 minutes just to see the progress from yesterday, progress from today, see any blockers that came up. And then every Thursday we would do like a backlog refinement.
Okay.
So we'd plan out our sprints, right? So let me kind of back up, right? So we'd plan out our sprints for the next 2 weeks, right? So what features do we want to get? What bugs do we want to fix? And kind of look at it like that. And then we would do a daily sprint to go over like, okay, hey, these tasks have been given to you guys. Where are you at with them? What blockers are you having? Which ones have you completed? Right. So we kind of go at it every day. And then on Thursdays, we would do like a backlog refinement. And so we would look at, okay, hey, some of these tasks, they're taking way longer than we expected. Some of these tasks are doing way better. And so then we'll kind of like do like a refinement. So we'll kind of move around and deprioritize certain things that we had in the sprint, or go ahead and pretty much deprioritize certain things in the sprint, or prioritize them according to what we needed and what we like needed for like our actual clients and stuff. And then every other week we would do like another sprint, like where we would look at, okay, hey, this is everything we got done. This next sprint, this is what we need done, and kind of go like that. And so it was kind of hard to adopt that in the first 1 or 2 sprints. But after that, it got into kind of a plug and play flow. And obviously we were using, I forgot what our tool was called. It wasn't Jira. It was something similar to Jira. And it was just cool seeing like the developers working on tasks. Because I think like one thing that hurt us, like me and my other co-founder Eric, as like non-technical founders, is that we couldn't just go into the backlog and see what's being worked on, right? And so we'd constantly just be hitting up like the team members throughout the day, like, hey, like what'd you get done? Or like, hey, where's this coming at? Right. And that just kind of throws them off because they're working, then they're getting a message, having a report to us. And we fully don't understand what they're working on because we're not technical. And so asking them the wrong questions and getting them having to have a huge dialogue with us just kind of throws things off. And then also just like, we're pretty impulsive. And so in the sense of like, we'll have like a random bug or a random feature. We're like, we need to get it done right now. Right. But it just kind of throws everything off the maps. And so, yeah, that was kind of like the things that we had to kind of learn from us. Like, hey, we got to stop doing that. We got to come up to these calls if we want to speak to them about certain things that we want to see where they're at with, instead of just kind of like message them and throwing things at them and throwing like kind of remapping the plan in the middle of the plan, and things like that. So, we just kind of had to get better at that. And outside of that was pretty good.
So it's more about adopting proper project management principles, like simpler terms. Yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Yeah, makes sense. And most of your team is based remotely, right? So a lot of your team is probably in India, and half of them are in Europe. So how does that work? Like, how does your hiring work? Did you have any challenges? Would you recommend hiring from a specific part of the world? What are your thoughts on development?
Yeah, so if you're bootstrapping, like you just can't afford to hire like the absolute best of the best that are like maybe based in America, right? I'm not saying American devs are better than Indian devs. It just depends on what you're doing. But in our situation, in our case, like I think the devs would have been better in like America in most cases, right? And so hiring was a little bit harder than we wanted. Once again, I'm not technical, right? So
Yeah.
having to kind of base like our hiring needs off of like someone else on the team is it's just a little bit harder. But most of our team is based out of India. So yeah, that's kind of how it went. Hiring, honestly, like we don't have a good process for that, right? And that's where we kind of struggle because we might bring on a dev, have him on a couple tasks for a little bit, and then kind of say, hey, he's not a good fit,
Yeah.
right? And it's just a lot of time and money wasted. And so it's kind of like a cycle of that. But we did work with a couple of recruiting firms that got us some really quality talent. And honestly, like if you're not technical, I would highly recommend probably working with a good like either recruitment firm to find you high quality devs or work with like a dev agency that can just like kind of like take over the whole entire project. But there's a lot of horror stories in that sense too. You just got to figure out which one's the right fit for you and like be realistic. Because like if you're building a simple product, it shouldn't be hard to build out, right? But if you're building a product that is literally like kind of going against what Google and Microsoft
Yes.
want
Yes.
in this situation, it's like these products are going to be a lot harder, right? And it's like don't like you probably want to build that team internally because a dev agency is not going to figure it
Yes.
out for you. And so yeah, just kind of like figuring things like that out.
Yeah, absolutely makes sense. So the point about building SaaS, which does stuff Google and Microsoft do not want you to do. That is what happens a lot in the money Twitter, cold emailing space that we are in. So it is a lot of, I call it a black hat SaaS. These are SaaS projects that you don't want to dive down into. So if you were just bootstrapped, and when I mean bootstrapped, I mean if you did not have a business and you were trying to build a cold emailing SaaS, imagine how that would go, right? So you have the 75K Google authentication thingy, then you have the devs, and then you have the accounts getting blocked. If you're doing, I think you might have also had to do LinkedIn automation type thingy on quick lines to fetch stuff, right? And that is a black hat SaaS thingy, and doing that is incredibly difficult. And it's not just about doing a static bunch of tasks, right? It's about, hey, you need someone incredibly smart to like figure out what is wrong and then implement it in code. And doing those black hat SaaS is like a huge challenge. Yes, that makes sense.
Yeah, but one thing that I learned along that way is that even though it is black hat, developers are developers. They want to code everything from scratch, but
Yes.
there's just so many existing APIs and like other pieces that if you just took the time to research it out and try to find like those alternative hacks, you'd get things done way quicker and have more of a reliable solution.
Hmm.
And so that was like something I learned the hard way, obviously working on some of these products, but nonetheless, learning journey. And yeah, I mean, I like if I was to redo this entire SaaS thing again, I would focus on like one core product, right? A product that I knew had a massive TAM, also had like a pretty strong product market fit, and then from a development point is like a very easy back end fulfillment, right? Like a lean team, less than like 4 to 6 devs, and like a product that wouldn't like constantly just keep breaking, right? Like that's the kind of product that I would look to build, and it's something that's less entrenched in like kind of like this gray hat, black hat world just because it's easier to build on, easier to hire for, and easier to market and get people on as well. Because like the thing that most people don't understand is that like if you're selling into a massive org, and that's where we want to be. We want to sell into bigger companies. Like your churn rate's going to be super high selling to people on Twitter. We've seen it before, right? You want to sell into bigger orgs. You want to sell them onto bigger plans. But like you're never going to be able to do that unless you have certain certifications like SOC 3, right?
Oh,
ISO, things like that. And so we ran into that issue multiple times for like something like Inboxy, for example. Inboxy uses Puppeteer, browser-based, right? And so, we're basically logging into Google and Microsoft without like the official authentication in some use cases. And, some of their IT firms were just not allowing that, right? And so like things like that, people don't understand. They think they can just build a product, it's a SaaS monthly subscription, but you got to kind of think about how pricing plays into your market and how you got to position that to kind of make it work out in the right way.
Gotcha. On that note of certifications and talking with ITs of big companies, what do you do about it? So if you can't, so Inboxy in its current form, it's incredibly difficult to get it to work. You can of course make it work via POP and IMAP. That's one thing, but in its current form, it's not sustainable. So how do you go about it? Like, what do you do? What do you do about that fact?
Yes, I mean, so in a lot of cases, if you like, so like for example, like SOC 3, we also got asked to get something else. I forgot which certification, but these certifications are somewhat expensive. I think SOC 2 is like roughly like 70 grand to get performed on, and that's before like let's say you fail the assessment, then there's like a lot of changes that you got to make on it, right? And so it's like another whole entire thing, and then kind of going back and forth. And so you got to kind of think about it, right? Like, will your product have true like product market fit in that enterprise world? If you don't have that, if the answer is no, then it's just like, okay, we need to reposition the product and go after a different market, and kind of think about it like that. In some situations, if you're just like, hey, I need to be in the enterprise market, then you're going to have to take it the hard way, right? So that's kind of how you want to think about like a lot of those like securities and certifications and things like that. And at the end of the day, just build a product that doesn't belong in this black hat, gray hat world. Learn from the mistakes if you're trying to get into the enterprise world.
Yeah, I have tried telling people that please don't build a LinkedIn automation platform. Please don't build another cold emailing platform, because it is a lot of headache. It's a lot of headache. LinkedIn automation, oh my God. If you count how many people would have gone bankrupt trying to build it, because it's horrible. It needs continuous dev, and it's one of those things.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you're trying to build with like LinkedIn, right?
Yes.
If you're trying to build like something like Expandy,
Yes.
it is very difficult, 100%. But the thing is that most people will avoid spaces like that, right? And there's gold in those opportunities, right? Because if you can build a good development team, like there's not much competition in those areas, right?
Yes.
And if you could build a product that has a lot of USPs, like it's a good place to be in as well. So I wouldn't like just throw it away. It is a little bit harder, but I think if you find the right team, like there's a lot of opportunity in those industries, specifically, right? Specifically on LinkedIn, and it's once again like LinkedIn is one of those harder things to crack, but it still could be cracked. Anything could be cracked,
Oh,
right?
you have one. You have one. You're like one of those as well, right? You have a LinkedIn.
Allegedly.
Yeah.
Allegedly, I'm not
Oh
admitting
yeah,
to
okay,
anything.
yeah, because yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay, awesome. So on to the last question about enterprise SaaS. So you are one of the people I know, except Vaibhav, who has really delved into the enterprise SaaS territory, right? What were some of the things that are different from selling it to enterprises versus selling it to agencies? What was the difference?
Yeah, the biggest thing is just the sales cycle. And honestly, like what I've noticed, because obviously we have the agency, right, and we sell to enterprises as well. The sales cycle for like tech, specifically with like cold emailing and like lead gen, is much harder to adopt than a service, right? And then the other thing I've also realized is the sales cycles are a lot longer when you're selling into enterprises. And when it comes to like things like tech, for example, that you're selling, like there's a reason why companies like SalesLoft, Outreach, they're able to do what they do. It's because they've spent so much time and money building like that brand and that reputation and like really building out like their G2, for example, and like kind of dominating the space when it comes to like sales engagement platforms. And so that's some of the things I realized. It is way harder to sell into an enterprise when it's something like a gray hat kind of tool. Obviously, like the thing that the best thing about selling it to an enterprise, in my opinion, even though the sales cycle is longer, the deal sizes are typically a little bit bigger but also like you're able to get them tied into like longer contracts, which help you mitigate churn and see the full LTV. Pros and cons. But I think like if you're a bootstrap team and you, let's say, have like a lean team, you don't know much on the B2B sales side of things. Like I would probably take more of like a product-led growth method, similar to how, Smart Lead is doing with Veep. Like he's crushing it with the SEO, right?
Yes.
Taking more of a method of like that than trying to like do like outbound lead gen and set your appointments and try to see yourself win a sales cycle, because it is much harder. It takes much more effort and there's a lot more time that goes into it. So that's kind of like what I've realized selling into enterprise. I think you just gotta figure out which tools are easier to adopt for them, and is it a pain for you to build? And then those are the kind of tools that I would want to like build, like really any tool that's like RPA, right? Like robotic process automation. Like any one of those processes could be a product in itself, right? And in a lot of cases, like the ones that are being sold into like finance, or I mean, finance would probably be a harder one, but any of those other like processes that you could probably automate into a product, you probably could sell them onto like an annual enterprise like type-ish contract, right? So yeah, it's just like there's a lot of pros and cons, and it just really depends on like, and this is kind of like one of those things where it's like a lot of us will build the product first before really thinking about the market, the positioning, the pricing, and like the method to go to market, right? And so like you got to kind of think about all of those things and do like more testing on those kind of things before even really building out a full functional product. Because like how you build a product is going to be based off of like those four things.
Interesting. So there is a lot of content available out there on how one can do idea validation for for SaaS, and most of it is aimed towards just agency SaaS. It's not enterprise. So how is it different from validating ideas for an agency? How is enterprise SaaS idea validation different from validating it for agencies or smaller clients users?
Yeah, so I mean, like with most agencies, like I mean, there's not that many agencies that are like in the 10,000 plus head count, right? I mean, honestly, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are some, but there's not that many, right? And so it's much easier to get to the ideal buyer or the person who has a sign off on it. And so it's much easier to get them to adopt a product and really see it through than it is to kind of go through like let's say I'm selling it to like Apple, for example. Like, is it easier for me to find an agency with 500 plus employees and get them to buy into a product than it is like Apple, right? Because and so it's like when it comes to just like validating an idea, like it's just so much easier to go into like these smaller markets, in my opinion, and get that initial traction.
Got you. Makes sense. Yeah. That reminds me, in one of your tweets, you talked something about if you had to do this all over again, it was something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. You would focus on a few things more instead of trying to do it all at once. And this was like from the outside, right? When people ask me, what does Nick do? I'm like, he's like, I think I posted a meme and I tagged you. Like, it's like the Indian god with 16 hands, and you're trying to juggle all of them. It looks like that from the outside. So how do you manage it? How do you make sense of it all?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, very, very bad decision on my part, right? And I'm completely honest about that. Like in this last year, we built so many products, and for the most part, like it worked out really good, right? Like, but like I know in the long term, like there's just no sustainability in it. Because like when I've had the most growth in anything is when I focus, right? And if I could focus on 1 to 2 core things and that be my main thing, rather than spreading myself across 6 different things, like I know I'll just crush it, right? And so that was like my big takeaway from like 2022. It's like I need to figure out which ones I need to focus on, and even if I'm going to take that that loss at that moment, because we've already put so much time and money into the other products, it just has to be right. Maybe I can revisit down in the future, but at this moment, like I got to figure out like which ones do I need to drop so that I can take us one step forward rather than just kind of trottling along. And so that's kind of like one of the things I learned. In theory, like if you look at it, it kind of does make sense. It's like, oh, all these products kind of work together. You're sharing the developers across all of it. you sell a person on one product, it's much easier to sell into the other products because they all kind of work together. Like, it just makes sense, right? But in practicality, with us being bootstrapped and the way we like work, it just makes no sense, you know? And so yeah, that's kind of like one of the things I learned. But yeah, like
So I
if
think
you're listening to this,
yeah, no,
go ahead.
that makes perfect sense. So you being someone from a marketing background and a sales background, the you are like an ideas person, right? So you have this idea and you want to like you come up with those ideas. And like I and like people like me, engineers, we are like, no. We are always like, no, this will not work. This doesn't work. It's too difficult. I'm always on the other extreme. So it kind of makes sense that is yes, in theory, all these things should fit together, but getting them built and functional is a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah, agreed, 100%. I mean, like I said, right? Like, if I could go back, I would work on a couple products. I think I could get them to market a lot quicker, and get a lot more traction in them.
Mm.
And then once they got that, like, sustainable traction, they're growing month over month, like very easy, very predictably. That's when I would say, okay, hey, I think there's more opportunity in this space. Let's try to figure this out, right?
Gotcha.
That's how I would have went about it again.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And getting users for all your SaaS products. I know that you do a lot of outbound, like obviously, but is it all outbound or is it word of mouth? What's the distribution split look like, high level?
Yeah. So, I mean, like, a lot of our biggest customers, because here's the thing, right? Like, some people will look at Inboxy, for example, and they say, oh, wow, like $17 per each inbox. That's pretty expensive.
Yes.
And then, you look at something like Smart Lead, and instantly, they're doing unlimited inboxes with their sending platform, right? But they don't understand it. There's still people in the space out there that have no idea what these products are and what they do, right?
Yes.
So we have like customers that pay us like close to $6,000 a month on Inboxy, and it's like, sure, could they go get a subscription somewhere else and save 99% of the revenue they're paying us? Absolutely, but they just don't know. They're not educated. So that's where outbound prospecting comes into play. But here's the thing, right? Like, and this is one of the things I realized, right? Like, outbound prospecting, if you're not going for bigger deal sizes, it's very hard to build a team around, right? Because like, you think about it, right? Like, if you are trying to all right, if you're doing outbound prospecting, you're gonna have to do a demo. They're like, the conversion rate for someone to see a cold email and go onto your website and sign up for a product it's very, very low, right? Like, they need a demo, right? And so let's say you're selling something that's month to month for $17, like in the situation of Inboxy, right? If you're doing that and you're going to a company that is probably only going to need 3 inboxes, or let's just say they only need 1 inbox.
Yeah.
You just took a demo that was probably at least 30 minutes based on very technical, probably going to go back and forth, and you made $17, and let's say they churn the next month because it's a month to month like product. Like, there's just no way you could build a sustainable team around that, especially if you're bootstrapped, right? Because like, imagine you have a sales rep that takes demos. Like, you're gonna have to pay that guy a base, right? And then you're gonna have to give him some insane comp structure, because $17 per inbox, like, you could give him 50% of the the first year's revenue, and he would have made like $50, and so it's like, it's impossible to build like a comp structure around that, unless you want to do founder-led sales all your life. And so yeah, that's kind of like what I learned. But in terms of like how we're going about all of our products so far, most of it has been through content, through Twitter. That's been a big one. That's been getting us like consistent signups, consistent users. They may not stick around for the longest, but it's always worked out great. But in terms of like big users, like, they've all came through outbound for the most part, and then kind of tapping into their like networks and stuff. So like, kind of really getting to know them, and like them always reaching out to us and bringing us people. Those have been like the 2 biggest things. And then the other thing too as well is like, we've built a very massive like user list across like 6 of the products, or whatever, 5 or 4 of the products. And so it's easy to kind of like take one product or one user from one product to the next, right? And so like, kind of just cross-selling in like kind of like that environment that we've built has also been like a huge like win for us.
That makes sense. Vaibhav from SmartWriter, he had something similar to say about like SmartWriter and SmartLead. It was like SmartLead grew like this because of SmartWriter. Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
Hmm. So I remember we were talking about this, I think, a year ago, and you mentioned this right now, founder-led growth and product-led growth. So you also mentioned you are getting a majority of your traffic, like you get consistent signups from Twitter. So how do you make sense of both of them? So content doesn't work without a face, right? Or does it? Does content work without a face?
I mean, SEO doesn't really always have your face in it, right?
Yeah, SEO.
And
Okay, yeah,
so
SEO. Yeah,
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah.
and that is technically content. And like great example, like would be like he crushes it with SEO. Like
Hmm.
for anyone watching, go look up his companies on SimilarWeb, and you're gonna be like, holy shit, like this is crazy, you know?
Yeah.
So huge props to him because like he doesn't have the biggest personal brand, but his products are doing great, you know?
Yes.
And so like situations like that, like I wish I learned more of like took more of a marketing focus like that.
Hmm.
Because you know, a business built on a personal brand is not like a good business to have.
Hmm.
Um, like great example, like I haven't really been on Twitter as much as I was like early in the year. And so
Yes.
if you look at my impressions from like, you know, January compared to December, way, way, way down, you know? And
Hmm.
so like imagine if like, you know, I took off for a week, right?
Yes.
Product's not gonna grow.
Yeah.
And so like things like that, yeah, to kind of factor in.
Hmm. Makes sense. So we have been talking about your success for a long time. Can you tell us about the agency? Like, how did it start from the very beginning, from the Instagram days? Like, what were you up to?
Yeah. So honestly, like I enjoy like I spend a lot of my time on the products, just kind of like product ideating in terms of like, okay, hey, like I think we should have this, testing out this, and kind of just looking at it like that. But the agency has always been like my favorite thing to run
Hmm.
because it's just like it's more in tune with my skill sets, right? Like I can control the output more than I can with the products because the products, it's like I got to speak to Rohan, and Rohan has to go in and build it, right? And so that's how it is with the agency. But like in terms of like starting it, you know, it's honestly especially this week, like I'm excited to talk to my team on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for the end year or for the year ends because we get to speak on like, you know, what we did this year,
Hmm.
what like you know what we're gonna get better at this next year. But like it's just cool seeing the entire like last 3 years of running it. Because like if you look at like how our fulfillment was in the beginning compared to how it is now, the clients we worked with back then to the clients we work with now, it's like night and day. And so that's been like the coolest thing to see, just like seeing like the full evolution of it. So I'm super excited to keep it going. But in terms of how I started, like it's funny. I was running another agency when I was like 17, right? Instagram growth for like doctors. And because I was pretty good at growing Instagram pages. I grew one to like 50 to 75,000 followers and sold it. And so I was like, oh, I can do this for other people. It was kind of more of like a luck and just like good timing whenever I did grow that page. But you know, I decided to go after doctors, and that's where I learned all my sales skills, like all my lead gen skills, because I was like, you know, just trying to cold email doctors, doing so many like different methods. Like I like had some dev build like an SMTP server and try to blast out like, you know,
Yeah.
thousands of emails a day, you know, just doing a whole bunch of random things like that. And then, you know, grew the agency decently, but the margins were terrible.
Hmm.
Like, you know, and we were charging like pennies, churn was super high. I think the like we would sign like about like 17 customers a month. That's where we would like average at. But our price was like so low. It was
Oh,
like 500 to 750 bucks. So churn was super high. Like we never crossed more than like I think like the highest month I had was like 12 to 13K in
hmm.
rev in one month. But like after paying the team out, because we had a
Yeah.
pretty decently sized team, because I didn't really understand automations the way I do now, and just like paying for taxes and everything, like
Yeah.
I probably lost money to be honest.
Yeah.
But made like $100, something like that.
That's interesting. This year, I think last year, this year, I actually learned the difference between gross profit and profit. I was like, oh, so I'm just like blowing all this money on SaaS, and that comes out from somewhere, and I'm not charging
Yeah.
the clients for it. Yeah,
Yep, no, 100%. And dude,
right.
the funny thing was, like, during that process, I just got so good at lead generation and sales. Like, you know, I was literally booking demos left and right. Like, I just knew how to get people on like a sales call, and I do pretty good on the sales call in itself, right? And so I was like, dude, like, I really want to do this as a service because, like, I'd always have friends like reach out and be like, hey, like, how are you signing these clients? Like, even though it's cheap as fuck, like, you're doing great in terms of like appointments and sales. And like, I was like, oh, doing cold email. I was like, I know how to do a couple methods here and there. And then I do it for them, and like they'd get some success, and then it kind of just ideated what is LeadBird now. And so yeah, just doing a ton of cold email, learning along the way,
Yeah,
and building on top of it.
makes sense. So you started like 3 years ago.
Yeah, I think I started like no, longer than that. I mean, like I've always done like random businesses. Some did good, some didn't. I've always had like these random things.
Hmm.
The true, like I would say, like kind of success. Success to me is like, you're doing like 10 to 50 mil in revenue a year, right? That's to me is like what success is
Hmm.
in terms of like if you're looking at a company.
Hmm.
Anything below that isn't like there, but like, you know what I mean? So I don't know, like that's what success is to me. But like the company I would say is like relatively on the way to that success is like LeadBird, right? The agency. It's just been cool to see because it's like, been working on it for so long. And like, like most of our growth has come in the last like 6, 7 months. And it just came down to focus and like doing the basic fundamental things, like it's crazy to me because it's like, most people are like, oh, like I need that growth hack that's going to take my business from 0 to 1, right? Or I'm looking for that secret strategy. But at the end of the day, there is none. It's literally just doing the fundamentals day in, day out, and just like keep stacking on it. And so that's something that like Daniel Cold Email Wizard like kind of really drilled into my brain. Is something I learned from him because I would just watch him, and like, when I first met the guy, I would always think like, oh dang, like, he's pretty smart, but I don't think he's anything like crazy special, right? And then I'm just like, how is he getting the level of success he's getting? Like, and I just kind of see what he's doing. And it's like he just executes on like the fundamental stuff day in, day out, right? And he just does that so good. And so, that kind of flipped a switch in me in terms of LeadBird. And it's like, okay, I need to figure out how we're going to set more meetings for our sales rep. He's going to close the more meetings we have, the more chances we have, and more opportunities we have in the deal line, right? And then it's like, okay, I need to stop hiring out for all of the things that I don't know how to personally do. Right. Like this is where a lot of people mess up. They say, oh, like, yeah, I need an inbox manager. Let me go hire one.
Yes.
And then they just put someone in there. Never works out. You need to know exactly what you're doing. Right. And then build the process out for it. And so, yeah.
I think it was a year or 1.5 years ago. Someone on Twitter was like, this is how you run a business. And it was like you hire a closer, you hire an inbox manager, and you hire a copywriter to write the emails, and you hire a scraper. And that is how you run an lead gen agency. And I was like, oh my God, Jesus Christ. Yeah.
The other thing too, it's like you have to find product market fit, right? And like people don't understand, like there's a thing as like with agencies called service market fit, right? Like how does your service, like that offer that you're selling, like resonate with the market you're selling into, right? And like you have to kind of think about it in terms of like the same way you look at like a SaaS product, right? Like how does your service delivery, like what you're actually giving to the clients, like kind of fit in with what you're selling at the price point you're selling. And it's kind of like what I said earlier, like you have to really look at like your TAM, your positioning, your product, your price, and your marketing, like tie all of that together to kind of build like what you like that unit, right? And once you kind of like figure out those kind of like fundamental things, business gets pretty easy. It becomes like all zeros and ones, like what you need to do. Because I think that's where everyone that starts off just doesn't get right. They don't understand how to position the product, price the product, build the product, and they don't know their market well enough. And if you know all those things, then it just gets much easier to go from 0 to 1.
Interesting. For LeadBird, what are your personal North Stars? Okay, this is what LeadBird is. This is what I try to get right. What are those?
Explain that question a little bit better. Like,
so what do you try to, what are the North Stars? So by that, I mean, for us right now, it will be doing the shit we said we would do on time. Just like very basic, but from software development, that's a lot to expect for. So what are those for you?
Yeah. Our biggest thing is delivering leads, right? I want to make sure all leads are being delivered and in a timely manner. We're representing our clients the proper way and that we have a high success rate, right? That's really about it. And that's like what I would say is like our core things. I want to build the leanest but biggest like demand gen agency that is able to deliver. there's a lot of big competitors in this space, and it's so funny because obviously we come from like that side of Twitter.
Yes.
Everyone runs a lead gen agency, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
they may look at like my agency or like even like Andre's agency and say, wow, like I want to be like those guys. Those are the big guys. And it's funny, right? Because they're trying to compete with us. But me and Andre, we don't see it like we're the top dogs because we know companies like Science, Belkins, and we're trying to be like those guys. And so it's always funny to just kind of like see that because like I always have like calls with people and they're like, yeah, like I want to get as big as you, and I'm like, dude, like we're fish. We're
Yeah.
fish in the game. And even like people that are building email sending tools, they're like, hey, I want to be Instantly. And I'm like, Instantly is doing great. They had insane growth, but they're still fish. Like the big fish are like sales loft outreach, right? And it's like same thing with Instantly. Like I speak to Nils frequently, and I know that he's thinking in his head, like, yeah, we're doing great, but we're still small fish. Like I want to go and get those guys like outreach and sales loft. And so I think that's kind of what separates a lot of like people from Twitter that are just doing it for Twitter versus like people that are doing business to be in business and be the best.
Makes sense. On that note, what is the 5-year plan for LeadBird and for SaaS? What's cooking?
Yeah, that's a hard one, man. Definitely want to have a couple exits down the road, right? Like I definitely need to figure out what I want to do with specifically the products. The agency, I honestly think in the next 5 years we'll be at a very good spot. Like I just can't see, what the path we're going at right now. Like I just can't see it. Like I mean, like there's never been a demand gen agency that's been able to offer our model at the scale that we do, have as lean of a team as we do, and then still have clients like that are publicly traded, like Palo Alto, huge VC funded companies that have, almost $1 billion in funding. There hasn't been that. And so like, I'm just excited to see where we're at in 5 years, right? Like there's no set end plan, but with the SaaS companies, like I think in 5 years, we'll definitely sell quick lines. I think that'll be one of the tools that we'll sell pretty early on. And then I'm hoping to have an exit off of like Inboxy, hopefully. That'd be a good one.
Inbox is extremely complicated and there is nothing like it, exactly like it. I mean, there is nothing exactly like it. Yeah, there are warming tools, but there isn't something exactly like it.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'm most excited for like these, the SaaS game has always been fun because it's just like kind of a roller coaster, but it's like I'm kind of figuring out like what I want to do in the SaaS space. And like the two that like I just see the most potential in the long run as a product, or like the two that we've been spending most of our time on recently is just like Scrubby and then Golden Leads, which is like going to be like our data tool. And those two I just like, because once again, like I'm building everything for the agency, and like I like we've tested every tool in the sales engagement space, right? And it's just like I know what the product needs to be at the end of the day. And so those two tools are like the ones that I'm like most excited for, because I know like what we could do with them once we like fully build them out.
Yeah, makes sense. On that note, I think that is a perfect note to end on. Do you have anything else to add, Nick? Anything else?
Hey, I had nothing else to add, but hey, if you're looking to get into SaaS, right, like, and you're not technical, I'm gonna give a quick plug to Rohan because like I think it's gonna be the right place to go. You heard it from him right now. His goal is to deliver products on time, and if you're not technical, that's gonna be one of the biggest things that you're gonna struggle with, just like I have. And so learn from my mistakes. Go hire a true
so much for your
and work on it.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. You have been there since like I had 90 followers in like May of 21. I remember like we got on a call. So like this is like background. So we got on a call on I think at 10 p.m. Indian time when I first wrote a thread on how to hire developers. Like May, April, one of these times. And I remember 2 days after the call, you just like met me, some Indian kid in his bedroom, and you were like, hey, meet my friend. You did an intro. Then you did an intro on, I think it was like a 60K lead prospect. And I was like, bro, look at me. This is not a 60K face. And that is what you did for me, which was, I think, 2 years ago at this point. Ever since I was like, okay, it's Nick. I mean, yeah, it's Nick, right? Yeah. So thank you so much for everything you have done. It's been an honor and a pleasure. So thank you so much for taking the time to come on as well.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is actually a really fun podcast. Everyone always asks me like questions on like agency stuff, but it's fun talking about SaaS.
Yeah, I thought it would be the opposite. I thought everyone would ask you questions about SaaS. Yeah.
Yeah, dude, I never get questions about SaaS. I get like basic questions. You ask like the actual hard questions. It made my brain think. It's like early morning here. I'm like ready to get after the day.
You should be called Nick Sasbram.